Welcome to the Meta Lighthouse Aldebaran channel. Thank you so much for joining us today for episode 3 in our series called Dispelling the Myths. In our last 2 episodes, Jason and I talked about some of the things that cause fear in people, especially Christians, about the metaphysics, about the word psychic, about what channeling is. And last time we talked about being contactees. And we got a lot of feedback after that video from people out there who were experiencing some of the same things but didn't really understand it themselves. And they really resonated with what we were talking about. So we're so glad. So I think we're going to continue that discussion a little bit today and then talk about some of the other myths that are out there. Go ahead, Jason.
Especially about myths around psychics. I want to shed light on truly what does it mean to be psychic or born psychic, so that we can dispel the myths that perpetuate fear and anxiety into some.
Do you want to talk about that first, or do you want to talk more about the contactee stuff? I mean, we have so much to talk about
whichever.
with you.
I mean...
I think I want to relay a conversation that I had recently with my mom. And I said, Mom, I admit that I'm psychic. You know, I've kept it from my family, as I've told you guys before. And she just burst into tears. And she was afraid that I was communicating with demons. And I said, Mom, have you ever known me to be a mean person? Have you always known me to be kind and caring? And she said, yes, that is true. You've always been very loving. But she couldn't put the two things together. Me being psychic to her just made her really upset. And she wasn't quite sure why. She just said, the word just really scares me. And so we talked about it a lot after that. And I think I helped her understand it somewhat, but she still holds on to these fears. So I think there's lots and lots of people out there who don't even realize that they're afraid of it. So we really want to dig into the reasons why they're afraid. You know, I think witchcraft comes to mind, you know, because when you talk about using the tarot, you're communicating with spirit to make better decisions for yourself. But there's this misconception that you're communicating with demons. So, you know, we talk about being contactees. You know, we talked a little bit about some negative experiences that we had with Greys, but our contactee experiences have been very positive with the Guardians of Light. So let's talk about that.
Okay. So
we'll just take 2.
Take 2.
We'll cut this little piece out right now. So where do we go?
Well, I'd like to shed some light on the guardians that we interact with. But I also, after you just heard Sara explain how she revealed she was psychic to her mom, and her mom had still went to an area of fear. And I want to shed light from a psychic's perspective, from a psychic's household, so that you can peer into what these families talk about. From what I have known about being born into a family that's multi-generational, using these gifts, the mainstay was that one of the relatives, my great-grandmother, was born with a veil over her face, and they called it a caul, a C-A-U-L. And to us, it was a direct sign of ESP. She was extremely gifted, very gifted, and she was the one that would teach me on Tuesdays. Every Tuesday I would go to her home, and she would kind of foster my gifts. But the call, so there is a book I had found years later as an adult. There was one book. I worked at this New Age bookstore, and there was a book called "Born with a Veil."
Born with a Call.
Born with a Call.
Yeah.
And I said, wow. And I looked at it, and it was about a Russian woman who was a psychic, born like my great-grandmother. So I realized there that there's something to that. And even back then, my grandmother's veil was sold. People that were sailors took it, they coveted it for good luck on the seas. So there's some weird
Wow.
tales with it.
Bizarre, huh?
Very bizarre. But in general, it just meant that you were born with extrasensory perception. That's it. It doesn't mean you're evil, doesn't mean anything about a devil or a Satan. If anything, it has to do with God, and so I just wanted to share that because the misconception is these psychics are evil and they're plotting and planning, and my childhood was nothing like that at all. So, yeah.
So, Jason, let's talk about the Guardians of Light and how, when you have this ability to communicate with hidden realms, you are open to, communicating with spirits and ETs, as it were, angels. So you kind of have to choose wisely who you're opening yourself up to, right? Because it is possible to communicate with demons, and I don't know who or would want to do that or why, but that's certainly the furthest thing from my mind. So, we had talked about some of the symptoms. Like, some of you out there might wonder to yourself, have I been contacted? Because a lot of these things we block out in our memories, or it happens while we're sleeping. So when you wake up in the morning, you kind of treat it like it was a dream, and not reality. So why don't we talk about that a little bit? Because I think that there's a lot of kids that are being born right now having a lot of contact experiences, and we want to shed light on what that means for parents, especially to know how to handle what's happening with your children.
And you got to ask yourself, who are they in contact with? You hear these stories and tales of people that are harming themselves, trying to kill themselves, and they're hearing voices, and they react on those voices, and automatically it's just assumed a mental defect, and let's give them drugs. But nobody's researching and asking the brilliant question: is there metaphysical influences influencing the physical dimension? You would think that it would be asked. So part of our organization is bridging science and spirituality so that we can transform the areas of mental health so that they take another step. Because the solutions that lie to a metaphysical problem are metaphysical. They're not physical, so it's not drugs. So, a lot of these voices, you have to say, well, okay, if something's going to tell me to harm myself or hurt myself or, berating myself, that is not coming from God or from beings of light. And Sara made a good point because she said, ETs and things of the such, but you have to ask yourself, right here in this planet Earth, never mind the upper heavens, right? In the lower heavens, it's not just us. There are other beings, great and small, that accompany this space with us. You just don't see them. They're not ETs. They can't fly spaceships. They don't come from the stars. They're right here. Some are wiser than humans. Some are not. But the point is, why do the ETs that are from upper heavens have interest in the lower heavens? Is it just about the humans? No. This is why they're here, because we're a threat, right, to other species that have been here longer than us. So there's interdimensional play going on in the Earth realm, right here. You don't have to go to space. When they're here to help, and not just us. There's species in the oceans and waters and in nature, and these areas are strategically isolated by who? Your very own government. State parks and federal landmarks, Yosemites and places like this. There's a stronghold on it because of other dimensions in interplay with beings, and they're not ETs. So I just want to give a little light to separate the extraterrestrial phenomenon of spacecraft and the ones that are right here with us.
Unfortunately, there's no real simple answer to all of this. If you're having any experiences, it's something that you just have to, meditate on and have, if you're having a relationship with someone or communicating with someone who's you can't see, you want to meditate and really, use your discernment to see if this is a positive force or a negative force. And I say it's complicated because, the symptoms of having contact can mimic a physical, ailment. So, I've had situations where I'm overcome with fatigue and I lose vision, really clear vision. It just looks cloudy. And I know at those times that I'm having some kind of interdimensional contact, and it's not always clear cut with whom. It does happen more in nature, and I'm definitely aware of nature spirits around me too. So you really want to kind of, if you're feeling any of these things, you want to dig into it yourself to try to understand who and what you're feeling. But again, this is kind of complicated, and it does take time. So I think that we should talk a little bit about the different, when you talk about the upper heavens and the beings that are visiting humanity right now. I mean, there's a lot of contact happening, and like we told you, our contact point is the Guardians of Light, and they're from the Pleiades, Aldebaran, but we've also had contact with the Greys. And there's a lot of information on the internet right now about those different races and more. And we want to shed a little bit of light on them as well. You hear people talk about the reptilians, how bad and evil they are. And certainly that is true for some. But not all reptilian beings are evil.
No. Not matter of fact, so much not so that you don't have to look far in human history at the signs and seals that are within certain structures on this earth that have to deal with dragons, which are just symbolic for the reptilian beings. And furthermore, they brought a lot of wisdom, a lot of beautiful teaching things, acupressure, and all these, a lot of these holistic arts are residues and remnants of the old that was contacting with the serpentine race. So no, it is a myth and a fallacy that they are to group together all reptilian beings as evil. That is just not true at all. And furthermore, there are different beings that have different interests in helping. Some want to help to shape humanity towards evolution. And when you look at the dragon races, a lot of them have spiritual, notation. So a lot of the Buddhist traditions, Tibetan traditions, Indian traditions, Chinese, all these things go back. And if you look at culture, there were a lot of advancements in their cultures at different periods of time because of these races. That some came from the draconian star system and area. And yes, they were reptilian. But so I just want to kind of shed light that, we want to, our guides take a stance against racism and the isms. So when you come out the gate right away, projecting all this evil and hatred towards certain interstellar races, it's very similar to racism. So,
did we want to talk a little bit more about the Greys and what they're doing here? And
sure.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, when they think about being contacted, most people have this image that they conjure up of the gray beings with the big eyes and the skinny bodies. And there are different types of Greys too, but, that certainly isn't the be-all, end-all with contact. By any means. So we're talking with very advanced, highly intelligent beings who have already evolved past money. They've evolved past war and weapons. They live in peaceful civilizations. And they have a lot to teach us because, as you know, we're still stuck in poverty, in racism, and in war.
And truthfully, these beings that are from the upper heavens are in a non-duality environment. They don't have the duality things going on between dark and light as we do here. And why are we kept in duality? It was never designed that way. We're kept in these things because of certain treaties that are extremely old, older than Eisenhower. I know they say, you know, Eisenhower and this or that, but these gray beings and these tall white beings go back much farther than Eisenhower. And yeah, Eisenhower probably made some treaties with them to upgrade things, and it was faulty because the Greys' technology is faulty. The tall whites, same thing. They need actual help from humanity in some ways. And yes, there are treaties. And because of that, it's blocked other things that were made possible with other beings. So the tall whites and the Greys have their issues, and they have their agendas because of their own races. They're not looking out for humanity's best interest. It's like a cohabitating relationship. The powers that be help them. These ones seemingly help back. This is where the fiber optics and a lot of the Teflon and a lot of things were developed, certain things that are dealing with computers. This is all gray stuff.
And the thing about the Greys, they evolved out of empathy. That's not really evolving. But if you just look at what a gray being looks like, they've got these enormous heads and a small body. So they over millennia, however long it's taken for them to get to where they are now, they've grown their brains and their intellect so much, but it's actually denoted their heart and their empathy. And they realize that they made a mistake, and that's why they're coming back to kind of figure out how to fix what's gone wrong.
And true, and here's another thing to shed light. They're definitely not us in the future. We are from more of the upper heavens. They're in the mid-heavens. They're not in the upper heavens. And so therefore, you'll hear things like it's us, we're trying to get back. But these are things that they had told certain individuals in keynotes of power to make alignments with them. And this is just not true. Their DNA and our DNA are different. Their circumstances and our circumstances are different. And they're trying to save their own race. And this is why there's a lot of abductions that go on our planet, because there are similar aspects to our genetics and theirs, but obviously not enough. So I just want to shed light on that.
I've had a lot of people ask me recently, when are we going to have open contact? When is full disclosure going to happen? And that's really tough because consciousness right now is in a state of fear. And, highly evolved beings don't want to come onto a planet where the vibration is so low. It's not good for them. It's dangerous for them, actually.
And furthermore, to add to that, by aligning with the tall whites and the grays, that means that there were secrets traded to put up defense mechanisms to keep others away. Some beings that come here have to do it extremely stealth because there are radars and there are things that go on that put them in danger. And that's because the Greys have done a lot of underground stuff and satellite stuff too. So there's different reasons that go on here that keep us away from some of them.
And I think what's interesting is that the Guardians, they want to help us create heaven on earth. And as coming from a Christian background, I think most Christians wouldn't believe that there could ever be a heaven on earth. And I think a lot of people would never believe that there was a heaven once on earth or a Garden of Eden. And we want to shed a little bit of light on that as well. there was once peace on the planet. And there was once a time when the guardians of light and other races were here working with humanity side by side. Empathy was the rule of the land. There was no poverty or homelessness, and suffering very minimal. So it really was a time of great peace and prosperity on the planet. So I was really shocked that was, when I first learned that was the truth. And furthermore, shocked that we could actually have that once again.
We absolutely can, and we're working towards that with great measure. And, in that time, there was also technology. And these are the remnants of the pyramids and things that fascinate people today. There was free energy, there was healing, there was sound therapy, all these things, levitation, acute psychic ability to the point of levitation. A lot of curriculum. Why? Because there was direct contact. There was times where beings overworked with humans and saw over humans in a way of development, right? That pyramid is either, again, like we told you, it's either a totalitarian system, which is satanic, right, to mock God, or it's a system of freedom under the rule of God.
So you're talking about the pyramid as a symbol.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you look at the back of the dollar bill, the pyramid with the all-seeing eye on it, put out by the so-called Illuminati, people associate that with, Satanism.
Mm.
And it should be, the way they put it out there, but it really shouldn't be because,
Right.
The angelic realm is set up they have a system where the least are taken care of by the ones who have the most. And the situation that we're in right now is, as everyone knows, there are very few people who have a lot on this planet, and they're not helping the least. So it's a really upside down situation.
Right.
But getting back to the pyramids, as a symbol, it means free energy, and the pyramids themselves, the pyramids of Giza and all the other pyramids that are on the planet that haven't even been discovered yet, were actually free energy machinery, right? It's technology.
It's all technology. I mean, when you look at the way things were constructed and things were designed and built with stone and such, you realize that it's technology. And it's not necessarily alien technology. These are accessible to us today as it was yesterday. As humanity awakens from its slumber and comes out of its sleep and goes from information age to action, it means that we can now start to reach for the technology and the expansion of consciousness to lead us back to the garden, which essentially is working with God and the beings, the angels, so to speak, directly. So back to the question when Sara said, people write in and say, when will they do full disclosure? Well, I'm sorry, but that's not in the human realm. First of all, to have disclosure on a human level, there has to be a treaty between at least 3 races. 2 of them want to, 1 of them is resistant, and this is why it's taking time in a leaking fashion. So there is a silent war, and humanity's at stake. And this is why for our role as humans, and people are here, is to produce empathy, not apathy. Apathy comes from a certain race of beings that is instructed to control, right? When the Bible says, what's the job of evil? To seek and destroy, right? And compartmentalize. That's this system of totality under a satanic regime. But yet, God's system is, again, freedom, free energy, reduced suffering, and everything vibrating in harmonics so that we can unlock the mysteries that plague us. And what is that? Well, it's direct contact. It's full disclosure. If we want that, we have to act like we're ready for that. Just because you want to hear that with your ears and see it with your eyes, too bad. You're not even worthy of it. And almost neither am I. Meaning, How do we get full disclosure? By, as a human race, collectively coming together to sow seeds of empathy, love, compassion, and be diligent about it, and not accept the lies of Satan. By doing these things unlocks full disclosure, and not just a bunch of congressmen and people in the military talking. I mean landings, people coming down, talking to you, where you realize that, wow, we're not so different. You know, something obviously is keeping us back from growing and evolving, because humans are very special.
I think one of the problems humans have are blaming each other, blaming the government, blaming religion, right? Blaming the people on welfare, blaming Trump. It's just blame, blame, blame without taking responsibility. So we need to accept responsibility. And what is that? Well, we need to look within us and see, what can I do to make this a better place? How can I contribute my gifts to, we keep saying this, to my neighborhood and to the planet at large, and it could be just in a small way, but it really ripples out. And we are each responsible beings. And, a lot of people have buried their heads in the sand and think that I can't do anything. I'm just a little person. I don't have enough money. Well, that's not true. You have your God spark. And with your God spark, you can focus on the things that you want to change and really focus your attention in a very, very positive way towards a future based on peace, love, and empathy.
And blame, what does that do? It does absolutely nothing, because the truth of the matter is there is no one to blame. There's no one to blame. And when people start blaming the homeless or the people, the folly in that is so ridiculous. When people blame others that have no voice, no power, no resources, we're going to blame black people, we're going to blame the homeless. But think of that. These are segregated groups that have really not a lot of influence in a lot of areas. So that is almost so ridiculous to blame something like that. But blame in general is foolish.
Well, blame comes from not knowing yourself, and not realizing that you have the power to contribute to the entire human race with your thoughts, and your actions.
And by choosing blame, you're choosing division. You're choosing to serve the satanic regime blindly. You don't even realize it. To choose to help and to choose compassion doesn't mean you've got to jump out and save the homeless, but using compassion before the grace of God go I is a much better way to align with source than to use blame. What follows blame is judgment, and what follows judgment is criticism, and it just perpetuates an energy of stagnation and creates fear and lower vibratory notes. So it's up to you whether you choose to be part of the problem or the solution. And sometimes being part of the problem is just our thinking, because thoughts do influence things. And truthfully, if there is someone suffering that's homeless and really has nothing to eat, why don't you take a moment and put yourself in that person's shoes for a minute and just meditate on that? What would that feel like to you if you literally awoke and had no food, no home, no family, no money, no resources, and you tried to ask someone to help you for change? Now, wouldn't that feel good?
Well, that's empathy, right? Empathy is stepping into someone else's shoes and really feeling what they're experiencing. And that's what we all need more of. And, it's one of our goals as an organization is to help people choose empathy, and to help people who have a lot of empathy, they're also known as empaths, understand their gifts and how to manage them, and how gathering empaths together can raise the love vibration on the planet so that we can get rid of some of these ills.
And really take it even from a Christian perspective. If you were to hold on to the biblical phrases that come in certain passages then these things that we're talking to would make sense. Harm, such as harm to the least of these, right, is to Christ himself. Well, if you took an attitude such as that, then you would want to do whatever you could to be proactive in helping to relieve suffering, whether it's homelessness or whatever the ill is.
We have to wrap up our video for today, and we're really happy that you joined us, and we look forward to continuing this conversation next time in Dispelling the Myths, episode 4. So reach out to us if you want to know more about our organization, metalighthouse.org. If you want to get involved, we'd be happy to have you join us. So until next time, have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.